All right, everybody, what is going on? Good morning. Hope you guys are doing well on this Monday. We are now officially in Super Bowl week, and we are now less than a week away from the big game, which I know that still seems like it's a ways away, and it is. But we're going to get there before you know it. We're going to start getting injury reports in a couple of days. We're going to start getting into the nitty-gritty of predicting the game, and boom, one day it'll just be time for the game. So we've got a lot of stuff to talk about between now and then, and certainly a lot of it revolves around Klint Kubiak. And I want to go over some stuff as it pertains to Kubiak in this video, but I want to talk about it in the context of this upcoming Super Bowl. So there's been one thread of conversation that I've seen from most Seahawks fans concerning Kubiak beyond just, oh, it's too bad we're going to lose him. Because at this point, we know we're going to lose him, right? We've all accepted that. All right, everybody, before we go any further into this video, I want to take a minute to tell you guys about the Sleeper app. We are just about to the Super Bowl. Now would be a great time to get on Sleeper. It's a one-stop shop for all your sports needs. Celebrate and chat about sports in real time with other users. You can get scores, you can get news, you get alerts with blazing fast speed, all kinds of sports stuff. You can play in fantasy leagues and win real money on picks contests. Enjoy sports together with a community. Download the Sleeper app today. And when you do, use promo code SBN for up to $100 match on your first deposit. And also, utilize the free $20 entry with no deposit required. All you have to do is make an account for that one. Terms and conditions do apply. See Sleeper's terms of use for details. Currently operational in over 25 states and growing. So check out Sleeper and have some fun with sports this year. All right, so basically, other than just Seahawks fans being kind of bummed out that we're losing a really good offensive coordinator, the main sentiment I see from Seahawks fans is, oh, this is a distraction. Why is this allowed to happen? Kubiak shouldn't be able to interview with other teams, and this is going to be something that affects the team negatively in the Super Bowl in a week. And I've seen that comment come up constantly in my videos. I've seen people talk about it on X, on Facebook, all over the place. My dad has talked about it. And I want to talk about that angle a little bit here. And I want to talk about how, while I do agree that it could be a distraction, this is not an uncommon thing. So let's start with that, because obviously this is not nothing. Right now, you've got two offensive coordinators for this game. You've got Josh McDaniels and you've got Klint Kubiak. And ever since the end of the conference championship games last week, Josh McDaniels has been 100% invested in scheming how to beat the Seahawks, and Klint Kubiak has been probably, I don't know, 90% focused on scheming to beat the Patriots, because there is some percentage of him that is thinking about his head coaching future, right? There has to be. He interviewed with the Cardinals and the Raiders Saturday, and I think he had dinner with either it was Mark Davis or Tom Brady or somebody high up in that Raiders organization Friday, yeah, Friday night. So some part of him is thinking about this stuff that has nothing to do with the Super Bowl. So on some level, there has to be some effect of that. I understand. But let's talk about a few things here. First of all, understand that Kubiak, this is not the first time in the last month that he's been dealing with head coaching interviews. He had like 6 head coaching interviews during the bye week before we played San Francisco. Go look up what the offense did when we played San Francisco in the divisional round. No problems. So it's not like Kubiak has never been distracted about thinking about being a head coach until this week. Yes, this is now the time where he knows for basically a fact that he's going to become the Vegas Raiders head coach. But I would argue that makes him probably less distracted, because now it's over. He knows it's his. The only thing that can change is that he decides he doesn't want it at the last second, but that's on him. And he clearly wants it, I think. I don't think there's any way that he would pull the rug out from the Raiders now. So, if anything, I think he's probably less distracted now than he was during the bye week before the 49ers playoff game, where, again, he had 6 interviews. And I know they were virtual interviews, but they were very long interviews. I remember reading those interviews are about 3 hours long. And like I said, it was 6 different teams taking a look at him. And while some people would say, well, now the team knows he's gone, whereas before they didn't know he was gone. Well, I mean, back then they knew he was in the conversation for leaving, and he was clearly open to leaving if he was already interviewing at that point. And since that slew of interviews during the bye week, we've had the Niners game where the offense did great, and the Rams game where the offense was phenomenal. So, a little bit hard for me to see the angle where Kubiak can't walk and chew gum at the same time. And beyond that, this is the way things work in the NFL. This is part of it. When you have good coordinators, teams want those coordinators on their team as head coaches. That is the circle of life in the NFL. Unless you have a coordinator that is good, but has already failed multiple times as a head coach, this is something you're going to have to deal with in the offseason if you have good coordinators. It happens literally, it literally happens every year, multiple times. Now, should it happen? That I'm not so sure about. I think that you could make a very compelling argument. The NFL should rethink the way they handle coaching swaps and coaching promotions, and maybe work out a system where coaches can't interview until after the Super Bowl, and maybe teams aren't going to be allowed to hire other coaching candidates until after the Super Bowl either, to make it fair. Maybe. I don't know. Remember, in the old days, it wasn't even, I don't even think it was that long ago. You could not, there were no restrictions on this kind of stuff. Now, they at least have windows of time where coordinators are allowed to interview. And then once the window of time is closed and it's time to think about the next game, the coordinator or the assistant can't be doing it. It wasn't that long ago where there were no restrictions. So things are actually a lot better than they used to be. So, yeah, I do think it's probably not a good idea for the NFL to operate like this, but this is something that every team has to deal with. And we've seen teams have to deal with it in the Super Bowl several times just in the last decade. And I want to talk about that a little bit in this video, but understand that this is just kind of the cost of being a good team. If you have a good offense, teams are probably going to want your offensive coordinator. That's the way things go. Um, like the other distraction the Seahawks are supposedly dealing with right now is the Jody Allen and the Paul G. Allen estate moving towards selling the Seahawks, and that's another one that people have been talking about. That's a different one, right? That's a little bit of a different case because that's not a normal thing, especially if you believe, and some people do, that Robert Kraft and the Patriots are behind that story leaking last week. If that is true, then yeah, that's a little bit of a different thing because that's a very rare thing to happen in the NFL, a team to be put up for sale. And for a team to be put up for sale right before they're about to play in the Super Bowl or have that conversation brought up, yeah, that is atypical, and that is something the team clearly does not want. This, it just kind of is what it is. And when I say that, the reason why I say that is because it happens all the time. And let's take a look at some recent examples. This is kind of the meat of the video here. I know we're already 9 minutes in, but I want to take a look at recent examples of coordinators who knew they were going to be head coaches before the Super Bowl. We don't even have to go back a year. Last year, Chiefs versus Eagles, the offensive coordinator of the Eagles was Kellen Moore, who had already interviewed twice with the Saints before the Super Bowl, once I think before the divisional round, and once again after the NFC Championship game. And everybody pretty much knew, and he knew, and it was common knowledge that he was going to become the head coach of the Saints after the Super Bowl. So it was just like Kubiak. And what did the Eagles do in this Super Bowl against the Chiefs defense, which was elite? The Chiefs had one of the best defenses in the league this year, and the Eagles scored 24 points in the first half, although Some of that was on the defense, and ended up putting up a 40 burger. Jalen Hurts had an incredibly efficient game. The Eagles didn't really run the ball great, but that was because they were trying to run the clock out in garbage time. That's one thing that kind of screws with the stats in this game. But the Eagles offense played great. I mean, they won the Super Bowl in a blowout. It was 34-0 at one point. The game was not even competitive. And I want to stress this again. The Chiefs had an elite defense this year, and when the Eagles needed to pack it on, they packed it on like crazy. 33 points, even if you take out the pick six by Cooper DeJean. Yeah, it was a little bit atypical. They couldn't run the ball with Saquon, but I'm going to say it again. A big thing that happened in this game was there was so much garbage time where the Eagles were just running the clock out that there's really not much you can do except run the ball into a brick wall, punt it, and move on to the next possession. But the offense was great. Like Kellen Moore, if he was distracted for this Super Bowl in any way, shape, or form, you wouldn't have been able to tell. Go back 2 years. 2 years from that, you have another Chiefs-Eagles Super Bowl. Both Eagles coordinators knew that they were going to become head coaches of different teams before this game. Shane Steichen had already interviewed with the Colts twice, and the Colts, obviously, they couldn't guarantee it. They couldn't hire him then, but he knew he was going to get hired by the Colts. And Jonathan Gannon knew he was going to get hired by the Cardinals. Now, let's talk about Shane Steichen here because we're talking about specifically offensive coordinators. Steichen did great. Jalen Hurts threw for 300. The Eagles ran the ball for over 110 yards. They were largely they were largely I don't want to say the better offense in this game. I don't think they were, but they had as good a game as they had all year. They had one stupid turnover that ended up being huge, but they played great in this game. Well over 400 yards of offense against a Chiefs defense that wasn't stellar this year, but it was pretty good. And I think you came away from this game feeling like Steichen was the man. Now, on the other side, Jonathan Gannon had a hard time, couldn't really stop the run of the Chiefs, couldn't get any pressure on Mahomes, couldn't force any turnovers, and ended up blowing the game. Ended up giving up, even if you take out the fumble that got returned for a touchdown, 31 points to the Chiefs with Mahomes limping around the field. Okay, that's not so great. Is that because he was distracted by the fact that he was about to become a head coach, that he had already basically secured the Cardinals job? Who knows? But Shane Steichen was in the exact same position, and the Eagles offense did their thing big time. Jalen Hurts, how many 300-yard games does Jalen Hurts have typically? Jalen Hurts is a guy who will typically win with like 120 passing yards. So to get that kind of production out of him, I mean, you did something very, very right. Okay, so you got that. And then there's a couple of tricky examples, right? Got a couple of tricky examples, like Kevin O'Connell. And Kevin O'Connell, when he was the offensive coordinator with the Rams when they went to the Super Bowl against the Bengals, O'Connell had already interviewed twice with the Vikings, and pretty much everybody knew he was going to become the head coach of the Vikings after that game. But the thing is, Kevin O'Connell doesn't call plays for the Rams, or he didn't call plays for the Rams when he was there. That's McVay. So I don't know if that example holds any water. Now, if you want to take a look at that Super Bowl, the Rams offense did not do very well. They actually had a negative EPA per play. They scored 23 points. They had multiple turnovers, and they barely won against a Bengals defense that was mediocre. So if you want to go to that example, okay, that's not so great. But again, what does Kevin O'Connell do for that Rams offense? We didn't know. And we still don't know. It's clearly McVay's offense. And we definitely know that O'Connell doesn't call plays. So that's not a great example. Then you also have Frank Reich in Philadelphia when they played the Patriots. What was it, 9 years ago in the Super Bowl? I looked this up. Frank Reich did not interview with teams for a head coaching job leading up to the Super Bowl because he wanted to focus on the postseason. So, hey, I mean, maybe the fact that he was willing to do that, maybe that impacted why why things went so well for the Eagles in that Super Bowl offensively, maybe. but that's not an example I can really go to either because it's not the same thing. Okay, we got one more example here. This is the big one. So, Super Bowl 51, Patriots Falcons. Everybody knew Kyle Shanahan was getting the Niners head coaching gig after this game. He was hired the very next day. And yeah, we knew. Everybody knew. They weren't even really trying to keep it secret. It was just one of those things where, yeah, he's going to become the head coach of the Niners after this game. He had done a great job this year. And okay, there's a couple different ways to look at this game, right? On the one hand, Atlanta offensively put up some good numbers. They had well over 300 yards of offense, almost 350 yards of offense. They were balanced. They were efficient. They scored 21 points against the number one defense in the NFL. Remember that. The Patriots had the number one defense in football in 2020, or excuse me, this was 2016. Yeah, 2016. And Atlanta was doing great stuff. They scored a touchdown with like 8 minutes to go in the third quarter. Game looked over. Nobody really remembers how effective Atlanta's offense was in the first 38 minutes of the game, right? We remember they did not score on their last 4 drives and blew the Super Bowl in humiliating and legendary fashion. They had a punt, they had a 3 and out, they had a fumble, and then they had 2 more punts and they blew the game. Obviously, them blowing the game has a lot more to do with their defense than their offense, but the offense had opportunities to pack the game away and didn't do it. Still, though, I don't think you can look at this game and say Kyle Shanahan was distracted by being the Niners head coach in a day. I don't think you can look at this game and go, yeah, Shanahan would have done a better job if he wasn't getting hired as the Niners head coach. Because if you're going to say that, then why did they do so well in the first 37, 38 minutes? You know, where did that come from? They balled out in that middle portion of the game against the league's number one defense. Doesn't make sense. Doesn't line up to me. Doesn't square with me. So I don't think you can look at this game and go, hey, Shanahan was hindered or handicapped by the distraction of head coaching opportunities. He made mistakes in this game, but they're the same mistakes that he makes in a lot of games, right? Didn't run the clock with the lead. That's kind of the Kyle Shanahan way, according to some people. That's what he does. He did it in the Super Bowl with the Niners. He had a 10-point lead in both of those Niners Super Bowl losses. Had a 10-point lead against the Rams in the NFC Championship game. So it's not like he was doing anything all that different when he blew a lead, I guess. So doesn't seem like it's affecting these coaches that much. Let me know what you guys think. I'll see you guys later. Go Hawks. More videos soon. But I just wanted to go over this and get people to understand this is something that coaches typically handle pretty well.